You're able to see my screen, right? Let me start. You're able to see my screen, right, guys? Yeah. So today we are going to start Spring Framework. Okay. Now, any doubts for Hibernate, guys? Before going to start Spring? Well, if nothing is there, then okay. Now, what is Spring? Okay. What is Spring? What are the modules are part of Spring? Okay. And how many things is there in the Spring core, and what is part of Spring MVC? Okay, all those things that we'll see as part of that Spring module. Okay, there are a lot of modules is available in Spring. Okay, mini modules, it will support for developing any kind of applications. Okay, now second, yeah. And one more thing, what is Spring means? Spring is an integration framework for developing enterprise applications easily. Okay, and Spring is a open source framework developed by Rod Johnson. Okay, exactly. Before going to Spring, it is a framework, right? So first of all, what is framework? Okay, the framework means normally we can develop some application by using technologies. Okay, so programming language means like C, C++, Java. These are the programming language, right? So let's say coming to Java, J2E, servlets, JSP, JMS, we'll call it as a technologies. Java technologies. So coming to the ORM means Hibernate, Spring. These will call it as a frameworks. Okay. So even we can develop the applications by using Java technologies means servlets, JSP, and with that also we can develop. There are some boilerplate code will be there. There are some boilerplate code means it is of some common code between the applications. Okay, so that code will be removed by using framework components. Like even the internally, even Spring also, if you want to connect with the JDBC or with Hibernate, even internally it use of JDBC only, right? But normally, if you are starting with, if you are developing some JDBC application, what all the steps is required, guys? What are all the steps required to develop any JDBC application, guys? How many steps required? Five steps. What is the first one? Yeah. Register the driver, set the connection, create statement, and execute queries. Last one is closing the resources, right? So here, let's say you are developing our application, I'm developing my application. So what are the common steps you will think? Register the driver is common, getting the connection, creating statement, closing resources. These are for common. Is it correct or not? So the logic will, you will execute one type of query, I will execute one type of query. But the logic only will change only for fourth step only. Remaining four steps is common or not? Guys? Yes, that common code will call it as a boilerplate code. That code will be removed by frameworks. So framework will take care of internally that common code. Our as a programmer, as a developer, we need to take care only the logics. Okay, that's the main thing of what is mean by framework means. Okay, is it clear, guys? Now, Spring is an integration framework. We can integrate Spring with Hibernate, Spring with Struts, Spring with JSF. Like we can connect with Spring with any other framework. We can integrate. Okay, so that is called. We'll call it as a Spring is a integration framework for developing enterprise applications. Spring can interact with any other type of applications. Okay, so that is the reason we are telling it as a integration framework. Okay, now it is a open source framework. It is a open source, so it is free, and it is maintained by JBoss community. Okay, and it is developed by, first developed by Rod Johnson. Okay, in 2003. Okay, now what are the modules of Spring? What are the main modules of Spring means Spring core module, Spring context, Spring DAO module, so Spring ORM, Spring AOP and Web. There are a lot of other modules also is there. Means these are the main modules. Internally, it can interact with any other modules. Okay. Now, Spring Core for to develop any type of modules. Okay, Spring Core is the main fundamental. Okay, to work with any other modules, compulsory we should know about Spring Core module. What exactly it contains? Spring Core. Okay, like how exactly bean will interact with each other, how exactly the bean have container is, how exactly the container is going to interact with other components. Okay, let's say you are going to create of multiple beans. Okay, how one bean is going to interact with other bean. One second, guys. Now, sorry. Now here, yeah. Along with that, auto wiring is there. How exactly we are going to wire one bean with other bean? Okay, all those things, bean scopes. Okay, and bean life cycles, and injections, dependency injection and IOC control. Okay, IOC. What is how many types of dependency injections are there? All those things are minimum things to work on with any other modules. So now we'll see first Spring Core. Okay. So what is dependency injection? What is dependency injection means? Normally Spring itself will call it as a container. Internally, it is a some container. Okay, that also we'll see soon. What is dependency injection means? Injecting the object dependencies. Let's say, for example, us, us, some. So let's say, for suppose, if I am going to create up some object inside this traveling object means, so it is depending on which object, guys. Ardikar object. Is it correct or not internally? Right? Hello. So internally, if I want to use of any of the methods inside this one, let's say I want to move. Okay, just I'm writing some method called move method void of some method I'm writing. Okay, now inside this there is some method is there, ac dot mm, moving or something set or status. Let's say now, for example, if I want to call the status method, it is depending on which method, which class, guys. It is calling the internet, it is using of ADCAR. That means that both are tightly coupled. Both are tightly coupled. Let's say if it is a tightly coupled, the main purpose of Spring is to move to use of loose coupling to make the objects as loosely coupled. I don't want to tightly couple my traveling object with RD car. So I can move. I can use of some other bus. I can move some other car. Okay, different car also. I can move by bike also. So I want to remove the tight coupling between the objects. That also the main advantage of Spring. How can you do that? By using dependency injection. That also we'll see. Okay, injecting the object dependencies, injecting the object dependencies at runtime, at runtime. So it is the responsibility of the container to inject the dependencies. It is not the developer responsibility. So what is container? Spring itself is a container or framework. Okay, it has two things. One is bean factory, other one is application context. We'll call bean factory as a container, application context as a framework. That we'll see soon. Okay, Now internally it is the responsibility of container or framework to inject our object dependencies, creating object and make it ready to use that by the application developer. Okay. Now what is the second one? This is also will call it as a inversion of control. We'll call it as a inversion of control or dependency injection. So how exactly we are going to achieve the dependency injection means there is some configuration file. We need to understand the container where exactly our configuration is added, how exactly it is going to create the objects. All those things we need to add in the Spring configuration file. Spring configuration file. The- Hello. Yeah. Any doubt? I'll explain through practically, guys. Just this is theoretical part, okay? But yeah, just wait for 10 to 15 minutes. I'm going to practical also, okay? How exactly it is going to depend inject the object dependencies, okay, outside. So dependency injection can be achieved by using Spring configuration file. Okay, and whenever we load the Spring context file, Spring container creates object for all the beans available in the Spring configuration file before going to access them. Okay, now this will remove the coupling between objects, tight coupling between objects. It will remove that. Okay, the dependency injection. Now let's see. Spring container, it contains n number of bean instances. It contains of n number of bean instances inside Spring configuration file. Let's say if one bean is interacting with or one bean is going to access other bean means we will call it as a bean wiring. We'll call it as a bean wiring. Now next. Spring Framework comes with its own container whose job is to manage the bean life cycles. What is bean? We'll call bean means any class. We'll call any class. We'll call it as a bean. Okay, internally Spring it says that it will say like it is a one bean. Okay. Now all that we are configuring as a beans in the configuration file. That is the reason we will call it as a Spring beans. Okay, every class we are configuring like a bean. That is the reason we are calling it as a Spring beans. Okay, and bean life cycle and associated with the dependent beans. If one bean is depending on other bean, okay, and that association also will be managed by container. Okay, that will called as a wiring or bean wiring. Okay, the container in Spring is provided in the form of interfaces. In the form of interfaces. One is bean factory interface, other one is application context interface. Application context interface is internally it is extending of bean factory interface. Okay. Now so directly we can't create a object for the bean factory, so there are some implementation classes, there are some implementation classes is available to get make it as a container. Okay, and there is one xml bean factory, there is some xml bean factory class is there. By implementing of bean factory interface, there are multiple classes that implements application context interface. Application context interface, let's see, xml bean factory interface is implemented by bean factory. Okay, now application context interface is implemented by many classes. File system XML application context, class path XML application context, XML web application context, annotation config context. There are multiple classes. Each purpose is different. Okay. Now we'll see separate again. This is for XML based. If you are configuring all our configuration inside XML file, then we'll use of these files. Okay, even this also we can use for XML configuration to read that Spring container to read the XML configuration file. Okay, if we are following of sorry, if we are following up Java based configuration, I don't want to write any XML files. Okay, so I want to configure whatever that we are configuring inside XML file, all that I want to configure in Java class itself. Then in that case we can go for annotation config application context class. Okay, now we'll see the examples. Now, what is the difference between bean factory and bean factory will call it as a container, application context will call it as a framework. Okay, now let's see how exactly it is going to load the configuration file. What is the difference between the way of loading the by using bean factory and the way of loading that configuration file by using application context? What is the difference means? Now let's see the common things. Let's see first means what is the responsibilities of bean factory and application context. Later I will tell you the difference. Okay, now how exactly we are going to load that? Okay, for time being, just to remember these two lines, I will tell you what exactly this application context.xml file contains. Okay, this is for loading wherever that XML file or Spring configuration file is available. Wherever our Spring configuration file is available, that we are keeping in the class path resource. Okay, so the XML bean factory will take the resource as a input, resource as part of his its constructor, where exactly that our configuration file is available. Okay, whenever this is done, whenever it is happening, whenever the container is executing this line, internally it will load up all the XML file and its content whatever it is there. How exactly it will store the data inside here means Spring first part is Spring the starts the container. Okay, first it starts the container. So and after that loads the configuration file, loads the configuration file into Spring container, loads that whatever the Spring XML configuration file, it will load into the Spring container. So internally it will parse that, it will read all the configuration whatever the classes that is available inside that Spring configuration file, it will read the everything and it will maintain. Let's say this is one class, let's say I have one more audi class is also compulsory required, right? Or else some other class is also there. So all that classes must be, all that classes must be, should be available. So whatever the configuration classes, configuration bean classes available inside the XML file, there must be some associated class also should be there. Okay, I'll tell you soon that also. Let's say for example, I'll show you that XML file, and then we'll go for better understanding. This is Java based. Yeah. Let's say for example, so this is a configuration file. I can say like a Spring configuration file. So everything is bean based. Everything, every class will be like a bean. We are configuring like a bean. So it is a main tag and a close tag in between ID. So ID is the name of the object, or the whenever you are trying to call, you want to get the object of employee class by using this id, by using this id value only we can get that object. By using that id only we can get this employee object. Okay, so all that will be read and it will store in one hash map. Okay, container will store all this information in one hash map, like id key as a id and value as a class, key as a id and value as its bean info, bean employee and its related properties. With that info it will create one object and then it will make it ready as a value, it will keep inside hash map. What is the key? It is object. Value is employee info object. Employee info. Now gathers the complete information about each and every bean and creates a bean info object. Okay, with that it will make it ready, it will read all the information of that bean. Okay, and so internally it will store in the form of key value pair. Whenever you are trying for that key. Whenever you are trying for the employee key, internally it will return employee object. Internally it will return employee object. Now, whenever required, we need to call. How exactly we can use of this ID? Okay, how to get this object means by using this ID means by using a method called getBean method. Okay, by using a method called getBean method. GetBean method is part of bean factory or application context. It contains both the places this method is available. So inside this bean get bean of we need to pass the id. Get bean of we need to pass this employee means it will return employee object. Okay, method will be invoked, the actual bean object will be created and it will return that bean info object. Okay, now let's after that it will return that bean info object. That bean will call it as a dispense bean. That will call it as a dispense bean. Okay, and if the object is no longer required, okay, then it will be removed from the container. Even that also will be taken care by container itself. We don't need to take care of that. Okay, now, in the same way, for application context also, before how we were using XML bin factory, we created a resource and then that resource we are passed here, right? In case of application context, okay, there is a class. This is the implementation class of application context interface, okay. So application context equal to new class path XML application context of this XML file. So whenever this line is executing, so the container is will check. So in the class path, is this XML file is available or not? If it is there, then it will load all the information. Then it will load all the information. It starts the Spring framework before it is a container. Okay, now load all the configuration file into the Spring framework. After that it will read off all the, it will parse all the bean information inside XML file. Okay, now it will instantiate the bean object. It will instantiate the bean object before invoking getBean method. The main difference between application context and bean factory is bean factory will create the object. Bean factory will create the employee object whenever we are calling get bean method. Whenever you are calling get bean method, that time only it will create the object. But in case of application context, whenever it is loading that configuration file, okay, whenever it is loading the configuration file, that time itself it will create object for the all the beans available in the application context XML file. Okay, that is the main difference. And this is of common properties below whatever that is there. Now, so see that the difference between Spring container and Spring framework. What is the difference? Okay, now let's say, so I said Spring container, that means bean factory lazily instantiate the bean object. Lazily, whenever it is lazily means whenever it is required, whenever we are calling the get bean method, that time only it will create the bean info objects. Okay, after see bean info object only after invoking the get bean method at runtime. At runtime, whenever that container is executing that line, okay, that time only it will create that bean info object. But in case of coming to the application context or Spring framework, it eagerly creates the bean info objects during deployment, during deployment time itself, or before invoking the get bean method itself. We can say at the time of during deployment itself, it will create all the bean objects and it will keep it ready to use it. But in case of bean factory, whenever we are calling, that time only it will create that objects. Okay, now we are moving to practical things. Okay, now let's go. I'm going to create a I'm showing you one by one. Yes guys, any doubt? We are going to practical things. If any point is not, I'll come back again to that points. If any point is not clear, we'll discuss that. Okay. Now, how to create that means let's first create one Maven project. Here we need to check up quick start only. It is a Spring core. It is not a web application. For time being, it is a Spring. We are in Spring core only. Spring web application we will start. That is at one more type is web archetype is web is there. That we will see when we are working with MVC applications. Okay. Now let's Spring ML config project. Okay. First, I need to change the path of this one. Change it to 1.8. Now, I'll copy one by one. Okay. Let me show you. First thing is we need to. We are working on Spring, right? So we need to add. We need to add Spring dependencies. See how many jars is there right now? How many jars, guys, right now? Only one jar, right? Now let's add Spring configuration. Okay, to work on Spring configurations. Now to add Spring dependencies, we need to add some dependencies. Those are I have used a 5.2.9 version. Okay, copy this Spring core and Spring context. Okay, for time being, Spring core and Spring context. I am going to add these two dependencies. Now let's see how many. Let's see how many. Observe it. How many? If I am saving it, if I am still I didn't save it, right? So once it is saved, now let's see how many other jars will add. How many other? See, there are other jars also. Spring core, Spring context, AOP, beans, expression. These are the most used jar. Okay, jars. Now, after this, let's go to our beans. Okay, everything is bean, right? Everything is beans. Now let's go and create of one bean. Any class, one class. How exactly we are going to do the configuration? All those things. How exactly it will load everything. Now let's refresh it. Yeah. Now create of one class. Okay, employee. Okay, dot some bean. Okay, beans or whatever it is, some beans. Okay, or some pojo. Okay, we'll call what is meant by pojo, guys. Did you heard the name pojo? Plain old Java object. Correct. Yes, sir. So even we'll call it as a bean or pozo or poji. Pojo means plain old Java object. Poji means plain old Java interface. Even we can achieve the tight coupling and loose coupling by using pozo or poji. Okay. Now let's go and employee class. Okay. Now so let's add off private int some values. Okay, int id private name. Okay, private some salary. How to generate the setters and getters, guys? Right click. Yes, right click. Source is there, right? Generate setters and getters. Select all fields and click on OK. It will generate of all the data. Okay. Now next, where we are now? Yeah. refresh it. Yeah, Pozo. Now, so this is the our class. Just assume our bean class. How exactly we need to configure? How exactly the container will load this configure this our class in the configuration class. Okay. Now go to here, not here. Go to, yeah. Okay, in the main, create one folder called resources. Folder called resources. So you all configurations will keep inside resources folder, guys. Okay. Now I'm going to, I'm copy pasting of bean, some XSD, all those things is there, so I'm copy pasting here. Let me, yeah, this is XSD, guys, for beans. So beans that from that jar files it will load all those things. Okay, this you need to copy paste, no need to write all those things. Our main thing is this is the configurations. Okay, our main thing is this is, now let's say how to tell means, so automatically it will show suggestions also. Okay, bean. Okay, let's say it is inside beans, main tag is beans, inside that we can write off multiple beans. Okay, multiple beans. Now id, id name, give some id name, and what is the class. Here we need to give off a fully qualified name of the class. Okay, com dot ibc dot pozo dot employee. Okay, dot employee. Okay, after this we need to add up some properties inside this. Next, property. What are the properties available in employee class, guys? Properties mean, yes, yes. Now, yes, here the property name. Property is a tag. Inside that name. Name means we need to give off ID. And next one is value. Okay, we can give off some value, some any value. Okay, next, or else if you don't want this tag means add here only. Okay, now one more property. What is the name? Next, value. Let's say mm, Puja. Okay, next, one more property, salary, and value is to give off some 10,000. Okay, now, so this is employee class. Whatever the properties of this employee class, all that for that properties we are setting the data. Okay, whenever the object is written by the container, it will return that container object with this data. Okay, now, and one more thing, it is very active. If you are trying to give one more id with same id which you have given, if emp, it will throw error. Will throw, if you are giving same employee id, it will throw an error. We should not give that same employee with one more same id. Okay, it will throw an error here. If you are giving, we should not give, this should be unique queue. Okay, now next go to our class. Where is, so our class is done, our bean configuration also done. Okay, now load this configuration by using client class. Now write one client class, class xml client, okay, with the main method. This is a core, guys. Spring core will use only the main method to run our application. Okay, not within the server. No need of server for a core. Next, so here, so what we need to do, I said two ways is there. I said two ways. Just go here and copy paste of those two lines. First two lines. Okay. Control Shift O. It will show Spring resources imported. Okay. And what is our name of the configuration file, guys? What is our configuration file name? Our configuration file name is beans.xml file. You can give any name. Okay. While loading, we need to give this name. Okay. While loading beans.xml. Okay. Our configuration, everything is there in the beans.xml. We can give any name for this. That name we need to use in the class path resource. Okay. Now, after this, now let's go. It is going to first, it is creating resource object. That resource I am passing to XML bean factory. Now let's factory dot get bean method, get bean of string. What is the bean ID for our employee class, guys? What is the EMP? Yes, we need to use of this EMP name here in the get bean of EMP. Okay. And so we need to, what is the type of the CMP? It is of employee class, right? We need to typecast it. Need to typecast it and EMP details. Okay. So shift or import it. Okay. Now, did I create an employee object here? So employee object created means I need to use new keyword or not, right? So employee object I have created means employee equal to new employee means this I can say I have created employee object, right or not? So, but in this case I am using factory dot get bean of employee ID. Just ID, by using that I am getting the employee details. So someone else is creating the object. Who is that? Container. Container internally will create that object. Now, for the more clarity, add one constructor here. Okay, that is of proof, right? Let me deselect all. Set of some SOP. Employee object created. Object created. Oh, let's go and run it. So, but we didn't display, right? Let me display also. System.out.println employee details. Sorry, let me write off two string method. Okay. Why do we need two string method, guys? Instead of getting each parameter one by one, each property one by one, with all properties, I am writing one method. Okay. That is called internally it will generate that method with two string method. Okay. Now let's run it. Is it created and written the data or not? See that, guys. So I called of get bean of EMP. Okay. So I didn't call this one. I didn't call any constructor. Internally container is called this constructor and return the data. Right or not, guys? Now, one more. There is one more is also there. What is that? This is one way of getting the data. Bin factory. Okay. One more is application context. One more is application context. Now, let's copy paste that instead of writing to waste time. Now, here. This is for in factory. Okay, this is bean factory, and the other one is using application context. Okay, one is application context. So here how I have loaded that. So here I have created a class also, but here I am telling to the this class load the bean.xml file from the class path within the project, from the class path within the project. Okay, that is the reason I am using a class path xml application context of bean.xml. Okay, now let's read it. Guys, did you observe this? I didn't call the I didn't call the at the time of loading only the object is created, right or not? This is called means where I have added this method, this message, employee object created message I have added in the somewhere. Where guys? In the employee class. No. This message I have added when this message will print here. So whenever the constructor of employee class is executed, right or not? No, it's still not clear means. Now in this case, observe it. Is anything displayed here? It is completed, but is nothing is displayed. Now let's enable this line. This time only the object is created, right or not? I said the XML bean factory will create the objects lazily whenever we are calling get bean method, right? Now clear, right guys, this one? Now, so in case of application context, at the time of during deployment time or during starting itself, all the objects will be created, all the bean objects will be created by Spring framework. Okay, not at the time of get bean method. Before that itself, it will create all the bean objects. Okay, now let's even this also will give same details. That means either we can use bean factory or application context. Bean factory will load lazily, application context will load eagerly. Okay, now let's move. This is clear, right, guys? How exactly? Who is going to add the dependencies? Here I need a employee class object. Who is creating? Container is creating. We are not responsible for that. Even for creating, if that is no longer is using, even container is also container is responsible to delete that object. Okay, we are not responsible. Now that means that the creation of objects, the responsibility we are transferring to container or framework, right or not? It is transferring the responsibility from developer to container or framework, right or not? Now this is for simple how exactly the beans will configure in the xml file. Now let's most of the times nowadays this is the old approach. Okay, but internally the same thing will follow even in case of annotations also or java based configuration. Now we'll go and see java based configuration. I don't want to write this xml file. Writing the xml file is difficult or not? Even if a small change is also there, small thing is also missed means it will not execute, it will not load it. Okay guys, right or not? It is a very difficult to identify the root cause inside xmls if anything is happened. So For that, my requirement is now I don't want to do any XML configuration file. I want to do whatever I'm doing inside XML. I want to do in the Java itself. I want to do in the Java class itself. Okay. Now let's do that. First Java configuration. I think it is in middle only. Yeah, I think if I have done B. So let's say this is a different project, guys. How exactly? Now till now we discussed about only XML, right? Right or not? Now I don't want to write the XML file. I want to write off annotations with Java configuration directly. I want to write that whatever the XML configuration that we are doing inside XML, I want to write in Java class itself. For that, we need to write a separate class. We need to write instead of that XML file. We need to write separate one Java class that will call it as any configuration file. We'll give that one class name as any config file, any name, but it should annotate with at configuration file. This class is equivalent to XML file, guys. Okay, this class is equivalent to XML file. Okay. Now let's see. So create one class app config. Okay, app configure. This is the configuration file. What is the before? What is the configuration file, guys? Bean.xml file is the configuration file in Spring. Now in this case, this class is the configuration file. This class must and should annotate with at configuration. Then internally Spring will load first whichever the classes are having at configuration. Those classes it will load it. First it will load those configuration files. And so whatever that at less than bin is there, right? This is for creating of one bin object, right or not? This is creating of one bin object for employee class. Okay. In the same way, here it will going to create one employee object. So here also at bean annotation is equivalent to bean tag. Bean is equivalent to bean tag in the XML configuration file. Okay. Now that is going to return one employee object, right or not? This is going to return one employee object with three properties data. Now here also return type is employee. This bean should return employee. Okay. Give any name, it doesn't matter. Give sorry give any name. I'm writing up get employee. Okay. Inside that I'm creating employee object and then setting the data. Okay, I'm creating employee object and setting, but I will not call this get employee method, guys. Okay, to get this data I will not call this employee object. I will load this configuration file and I will use of employee dot class file. I will use it. Now this is for at config. This is equivalent to this part. Is it clear, guys, this part? So in this case, what I'm doing, I want to remove XML configuration file. For that, I'm adding all these things in the Java configuration file. Whatever that I have added at bean tag, this is equivalent to in app configuration class at bean method at bean with this method is equivalent for that. Okay. Now let's go to client class. Let's go to client class. Now what I am doing here is so before we are loading XML files, right or not? That is the reason I used either bean factory, XML bean factory, or application context, right? XML path, class path, XML application context files. To load the XML files, to load the XML file Spring configurations, then we need to use of these things, guys. Okay. If we are using Java based configuration, then we need to use of annotation config application context. If If you are going for the annotation based, then we need to use of annotation config application context class to load our Spring configurations. Okay. Now let's say, so application context equal to new annotation config application context of what is our configuration file, guys? What is our configuration file? The XML equivalent configuration file in Java class is which one? Sorry? No, no, employee is the bin. So I said now, so in the annotation based, I don't want to create up this file, guys. Let's say this is our previous project, right or not? Close all these things for clarity. See, this is our previous configuration file, right? We have XML file is there, right? Our configuration file. But in this case, do you have any XML configuration file in this project? See that I don't have any, only employee class, client class is there, and app configure. There is no XML file is there. Whatever that XML file configuration, all those things that we are doing. So all that configuration I am doing in the Java class itself by using at configuration annotation. Okay, by using at configuration annotation. So now the app config is the configuration file for Java config for this project. Okay, in this case, this is the configuration file. Okay, now in this case, I am moving all the whatever the code that is part of XML, I am transferring to Java. So that is equivalent to app config dot class. Okay, now whenever you are running this, whenever before we are loading this XML file, right or not, right? Before we are loading of this XML file, correct or not, right? See, we are loading this XML file. Now that is the configuration file that time, this XML file. Now in this case, in this project, our configuration file is, this is the one, app config is the our configuration file, or you can treat like at the configuration annotation is there, right? You can treat that class is a configuration class. Okay, now we need to load this class. We need to tell Spring container load this class. Whichever the annotation is, whichever class having annotation with at configuration, those are configuration classes. Load them first. Okay. For that, the class is annotation config application context. With this class, we are loading up our Java config class, app config class I am loading. So in this line, the Java container will create object for whatever the beans that is part of this. How many beans are there? Only one bean is there. It will create object for employee class, and it will store all this data inside employee object. Okay, how to get that, how to get that? Before we used of get bin of name of the id we given, right or not? Before we given this name of id, right? The value of id we have given to get the employee object. Now we don't have any id, right? And we don't have any value of object name also, nothing is there. In that case, what we are going to give? Context dot get bin of the bean class. Whatever the class that you are going to get, directly you can give that class itself. Internally it will take care of this. It will create object for this method, for this method. After that it will return up. So it will check in the configuration. Is there any admin annotation is returning this employee object? Then that object will, that method will execute and it will make it ready. Now let's after that it is going to return employee object and it is going to return that. Now let's see that. Now also we are getting up same data. If you want constructor everything is not required. If you want I will add it. So, eh, okay, let's run it. See, object created and then it is displaying of the data which we have configured inside appconfig.xml Java. Right or not? Is it clear, guys? What is the XML configuration and what is Java configuration? I'm telling now. So we will not nowadays we are not using of XML configuration, but for your idea. So that is the reason for simply simple. I have explained this bin configuration. Okay, with XML one sample. But most of the times we will use of Java based configuration only. Most of the times we will use of Java based configuration only. Okay, is it clear, guys? Now we are moving to bean scopes. We are moving to bean scopes. What is bean scopes? Bean scopes means how exactly the container you want to create the objects. For each request, you want to create one object, or you want to create only single object and return the same object for whoever is calling. Let's say we are 10 people, let's say assume, okay, 10 people are calling 10 times request means you want to return the same object, or you want to create a different object for each and every employee. You want to create a separate object or same object you want to return for all employee. How the container want to create that objects, okay, that is internally by using bean scopes we can manage. Okay, now let's go on. Yeah, beans, okay, spring beans are objects. Bean means one object, right now. Beans means the objects which are created and managed completely by container. How exactly the container want to create the objects? For each request you want to create one object, or for all members you want to create single object and return the same object? How exactly you want to contain and maintain that objects means by using the scopes. Okay, these scopes are heart of application. Okay, scopes are heart of application. Beans can be defined in either by using XML configuration or by using annotations. Anything we can. In XML configuration, we need to add up bean tag and inside beans, right? That we have just now seen that. Now, so if you want to go for annotation based, then we need to use of at component, at service, at controller, at repository on top of class definitions. Okay, or we can also achieve bean definitions completely in Java also by using Java configuration. Okay, most of the times we'll use this only. Okay, Java configuration, and these annotations we will use in mostly for Spring MVC application. For controller, we'll annotate with that controller. For service layer, we'll annotate with that service. For DAO layer, we'll annotate with at repository. That we'll see at the time of Spring MVC context. Okay, now there are five types of bean scopes are there. Okay, there are five types. Out of this, the last one will be used. That will be used in the portlet context. That will be used in the portlet. In case of portlet application only, that will be used. Okay, for timing that is not required. And remaining out of four, the request and session scopes will be used in Spring MVC application, Spring web applications. In case of web applications only, we'll use a request and response scopes. Scope, okay, beam scopes. And for timing in Spring Core, we can use of singleton and prototype. Singleton and prototype will be used. Now let's see what is singleton. What is singleton means only one instance will be created per container. Container will create only one instance whoever is calling, the container will return same object, same instance only it will return, then we'll call it as a singleton. By default, Spring will create a singleton scope. If you are not declaring anything, container will create a default is a singleton scope. Okay, default is a singleton scope. If you want to go for a prototype, what is mean by prototype? The prototype means, so for each and every times, for each and every request, each and every time you are calling of get pin method, it will create a new object. If you are keeping the prototype as a scope means, each time how many number of times you are calling of get pin method, that many number of times it will create the object. Okay, this is the difference between singleton and prototype. Now let's go and see practically. Now let's go and see practically. Is not there? Let me add it. Okay, or else I can use of some other one, anything. Or else if you want, I can create of that one. Everything is same. Everything is same, guys. So if you want of if you want in XML based, if you want in XML based, now let's go. Already you have created one before on our application, right? Yeah. Now let's go on in XML configuration. In XML configuration, so we have a attribute called scope. Okay, we have attribute called scope. Now let's prove that. So if you are not declaring anything, if you are not declaring anything, the container will create it as a singleton. So every time it is going to create a single object. Close others. Now run it. Let's say for suppose create one more, call one more time, call one more time, one step one. So now let's see how many objects it will create, or we can proof is, let's say employee dot hash code. Okay, if hash code is same means, then the both objects are same, right? Employee 1. Okay, or else system.out.println equal to employee details. Okay, if both objects are same means, then I can say it is not creating new object, right or not? Right? Now let's run it. See, it is created, object created only one time, it is message is displayed, right? Now the both time it is displayed the message data, and hash code is also same, and both values are, it is giving condition is both are equal to true. Now let's go and change that to prototype. Scope equal to prototype. Prototype. So in this case, I'm telling whenever I'm calling get bin of employee, create each time one object. Each time one object. Now let's see. How many times it is called, guys? Right or not? The change is small, but it is created multiple objects. It is created one time first object, and it displays the message, okay, data, and again it is called, whenever you are calling again, it is creating one more object, and see that it is displayed the data, and hash code is also different, and both are equal means false. That means that it is creating new or not every time. When the bean scope is prototype means, bean scope is prototype. Let's see, the prototype means once in one instance per use, one instance per use. If I'm calling one time get bean method, then that time it will create one object. So if I'm calling one more time the get bean method, then it will create of one more method. Okay. Let's say if client uses this bean five times, then five instance bean will be created. Clear or not this one? Now this is of XML. This is XML one. Now same how to achieve in the Java configuration. Same how to achieve in Java configuration is, now let's go to our Java configuration project, and let's delete of this. Now so in the we have added one scope attribute, right or not? By default, if I am not adding also, by default, if I am not adding scope attribute, there is annotation called scope. Okay. By default, singleton. By default, singleton will be there. If you are not adding also, by default it will be like compiler or container will treat it as a singleton. Okay. Now let's see in case of client config, call one more time. It is with Java configuration, guys. Okay. Detailed enough. I'm just making equals. If it is written true means, then both are returning same object. Let's run it. See how many times it is object is created? Only once, and both are true. That means it is using same object. Right or not, guys? Now, now, now let's see. If I am changing it to, what is the value here, guys? What is I need to change? If you want to make it prototype means compulsory we need to enable this scope annotation and change the value to prototype. Right? Now let's see the behavior of this. Okay. This is Java configuration, guys. Now let's run it. How many times it is created now? Two times. Right? Now this is what Java configuration with scope, singleton and prototype. Is it clear, guys? These are minimum things, guys. If not clear, let me know. I'll repeat it again. Okay, I'm telling multiple times, guys. Okay. Now, this is what for scope and request and session will be discussed in application. Sorry, in Spring MVC. In Spring MVC application. For today, this is enough, and practice it, guys. This is Spring is basics for Spring Boot. This is like all concepts will be used inside Spring Boot, guys. Annotations, most of the annotations, almost all annotations will use in Spring Boot. If you are not understanding this itself, you can't understand Spring Boot. I'm telling now only. Spring compulsory, all the annotations, everything, whatever the concept that you are understood, then Spring Boot you can understood easily. Okay. Sorry, software for software for Spring is there is no new softwares. We need of jars. Okay. Actually, I have created a where is I have not framework Spring. Actually, I'm just created of this links. Okay. But normally we are using of dependencies through form.xml file. If you are not using form.xml file, okay, if you are going for ant based, then ant build means then we need to download all the jars we need to add in the application. Okay, in the application class path. But in this case we are using of Maven, so we no need of download all the softwares. Just we need to add the dependencies. So internally Maven will take care of downloading all the dependencies, required dependencies. Okay, no need of new softwares. Clear or not? no new softwares. It is like hibernate applications how you are doing, right? Do for time being. Okay, if any software is required, I'll tell you. In case of Spring Boot, if you are working with microservices, that time we need of some softwares, I'll tell you that time. Okay, if anything is required. Is it clear, guys? Tomorrow I'll explain auto wiring. Okay, some different concepts I'll bring bean life cycle. Okay, with some examples I'll how exactly Spring with JDBC. Okay, and Spring with JDBC template. I'll tell you some examples tomorrow. Auto wiring is very important everywhere. Compulsory auto wiring, we need to use it. If you are not understanding why at auto wire annotation is using, means there is no, you can't understand the application, the configuration you can't understood. Okay, tomorrow everywhere compulsory we need to use of at configure, at auto at qualifier, many annotations will use. You people need to remember these annotations, when exactly you need to use those annotations. Okay, so this time you understood when we need to use at scope annotation, guys. When we need to use at bin annotation, when we need to use at configuration. Yes, actually, to remove the XML configuration file completely, okay, we will go for a Java based configuration. Okay, to make equivalent to the XML in the Java, we need one annotation called at configuration. Okay, this is the primary annotation. Inside that, we have a at beans. We will annotate all the beans, right, inside XML configuration. For each XML for each bean, we need to add at one at the date bean annotation, and we need to write one method to create object for that respective class. Let's say inside this XML configuration file, inside this XML configuration file, let's say I have of employee 1, employee 1. Now in this case, how many employee objects is required? Two, right? We can create one more employee object also, but that even we can give off a name also. Even we can give name also. Let's say for suppose I'm giving here as name. Okay, emp. Okay. Now in this case, we created two, right? Right or not? Two objects for the same class. Now let's go and see how we can do in the Java. Go to app config. Go to app config. Create one more. We need to change the name. Otherwise, it will give error. Okay. The scope name must be. We need to give some different name. This will use at the time of at the time of 1000. Okay. Give off some triple two. Let's go to client test. Instead of this, I can use emp1. Can use in this case emp. Okay, this is the name of the bean. Get bean of name. This I have configured. This I have configured. Where I have configured this one, cmp and emp1. If we want to get the object of this one, then we need to use this bean name. Okay, if we want to get the employee object for this second bean of emp1, then we need to take this name and go to use of get bean of emp1. Now let's see that this one. Is it coming or not? Right? It is employee 2. Noted, right? This is the one is for EMP, first one. Okay. The second one is for EMP1 with the data is 222 ROM and 1000. Right or not? Like this, if any other classes is there, let's say product class is there, okay, address class is there, like that you can create of multiple. Okay, got it or not? So if it is a same means, then we need to use of at qualifier annotation. At qualifier annotation also we need to resolve the ambiguity between multiple beans. Okay, multiple beans are same name means, then it will throw some exception. That time we will use of at qualifier annotation, that I'll explain you in the tomorrow's class. Okay, in the coming classes. For time being, just remember these things. Is it clear, guys? No, okay, guys. And fine. Before coming tomorrow, at least revise these things. Okay, and everything is like every day will create a configuration class is common. Okay, that beans is common and a client class is common. Okay, these are common things every day until Spring Core. Until Spring Core, will use of common things. If you are not coming without reading this one, again I need to repeat everything. Okay, guys, please at least if you're not practicing, at least listen once and then come. Okay, is it okay? Okay, guys, yeah, yeah, please. What happened? Not downloading or loading? Keep. Oh, maybe